It had been years since the rebellion ended, and the Seven Kingdoms were still healing. Robert Baratheon sat heavy on the Iron Throne, his crown more of a burden than a blessing. He drank more than he ruled, and his heart still ached with the memory of Lyanna Stark. Ned Stark, Warden of the North, had done everything to protect Robert's rule, even if it meant hiding the biggest truth he ever carried. The boy called Jon Snow, raised at Winterfell as his bastard, was not his son at all. Jon was the child of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, born of love, not war. But Robert could never know that. Not the man who hated all Targaryens with burning fury. But secrets never stay buried forever. Varys had always whispered in shadows, but this time his whispers turned louder. One day, a sealed letter arrived in King's Landing. It was meant for Robert only. The writing was neat and proper, and the seal was northern. It was from someone at the Wall, a maester who had pieced together clues. It spoke of Jon's true mother and a birth that happened at the Tower of Joy. Robert's hand shook as he read. His face turned pale. He remembered Lyanna's face when she died, her words, "Promise me, Ned." He thought those words meant she wanted to be buried in Winterfell. But now he saw the truth. Ned had lied. He had hidden Rhaegar's child, right under Robert's nose. A rage unlike any he had felt before rose in his chest. All those years, drinking beside Ned, laughing, crying, and he had been made a fool. He summoned his council. "Ned Stark has betrayed me," Robert growled, slamming the letter on the table. "He lied about Lyanna. That bastard boy Jon Snow is a Targaryen." The court went silent. Even Littlefinger seemed unsure what to say. Lord Renly spoke first. "Your Grace, this could be a trap, a rumor." Robert's eyes burned. "No, this is Ned's hand. I know it. I trusted him above all, and he stabbed me with lies." Cersei said nothing, but inside she smiled. Chaos suited her well. By the end of the day, ravens had flown to the north. Robert's message was short and cold. "Send the boy to King's Landing, or be named traitor." At Winterfell, Ned Stark read the letter in silence. His face was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. Catelyn read it over his shoulder and gasped. "He knows," she whispered. "Ned, he knows about Jon." Ned looked out the window. Jon was in the courtyard, sparring with Robb. The two boys laughed, as they always did. To Jon, Winterfell was home. To Ned, Jon was the last piece of his sister. "I won't give him to Robert," Ned said firmly. "Jon is innocent." "You'll start a war," Catelyn said. "Robert won't forgive this." "Then let it come." But the North was not ready for war, and Ned knew it. He sent ravens to his bannermen, telling them to prepare, but in secret he needed time. He needed to get Jon away somewhere safe. That night he called Jon to his chambers. "My boy," he said, voice low and tired, "there is something you must know. You are not my son." Jon frowned. "What? You've always said—" "You are Lyanna's son, and Rhaegar Targaryen's. I lied to protect you. But now the truth is out, and the king wants you dead." Jon's world crashed in a heartbeat. Everything he knew was a lie. "But what now?" "You must leave Winterfell. Ride for the Wall tonight. It's the only place the king won't follow. I'll buy you time. Go." Jon wanted to ask 100 questions, but there was no time. He packed his things and rode into the cold night. As the snow fell on Winterfell, Ned stood on the battlements and watched the stars. He knew what was coming. Robert would not let this go. 2 old friends, now 2 enemies. And all because of one boy who carried the blood of ice and fire. The next morning, the ravens flew across the kingdoms like silent messengers of doom. Word spread fast. Lord Eddard Stark had defied the king. He had refused to hand over the boy known as Jon Snow, now rumoured to be the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. In King's Landing, Robert Baratheon stood in the throne room, red with rage. "He thinks he can lie to me for 17 years and walk free," Robert shouted at his small council. "I'll drag him from his frozen castle myself, and burn that boy on a pyre if I must." Stannis Baratheon, quiet and stern as always, spoke. "If the boy is truly a Targaryen, then your claim to the throne is weakened. Some lords may see the boy as the rightful heir." That was the real fear. Robert was no fool. He knew how lords whispered in the dark. A Targaryen boy raised in the north? That was dangerous. Even if Jon didn't want the crown, others might want it for him. The mere idea of his bloodline was a threat. Cersei Lannister leaned forward, her voice like silk soaked in poison. "The North stands with Ned. We must act quickly. Crush Winterfell before the rest of the realm starts choosing sides." Robert nodded slowly. "Then war it is." He gave the command, "Gather the banners, the crown rides north." Back in Winterfell, the snow was falling thicker now. Ned had sent Jon to the wall under secret guard, but deep down he knew it wouldn't be enough. If Robert sent riders, they'd track Jon. And once they reached the wall, not even the Night's Watch could stop a royal decree. Robb Stark sat across from his father, fists clenched. "Let me ride," Robb said. "Let me take men and guard Jon's path. If they come for him, they'll have to go through me first." "You are brave," Ned said softly, "but this war is not just swords and shields. It's names, blood, and lies. You carry the Stark name. If you die, Winterfell dies with you." "But Jon is my brother," Robb argued. Ned looked at him with pain in his eyes. "No, Robb, he's not. But he is your family, and that's enough." Down in the crypts of Winterfell, Ned knelt before Lyanna's tomb. Her statue stood cold, stone eyes staring into the darkness. He whispered, "I kept my promise, Lya, but it's all falling apart. Robert was never going to forgive. I see that now. He never wanted justice. He wanted vengeance." That night, 2 riders arrived at Winterfell under a white flag, Sir Barristan Selmy and Lord Renly Baratheon. They were sent to deliver a final offer. Hand over the boy, or the full force of the Crown's army will march within the fortnight. Ned didn't let them into the hall. He met them at the gates. "I will not hand over a child to be murdered, not to any king, not even to a friend," Ned said coldly. Barristan looked weary. "Robert trusted you, Lord Stark, and I trusted him to love Lyanna more than his hatred for Targaryens. I was wrong." Renly, ever the smoother talker, tried one last time. "Think of your people, Lord Stark. War will burn half the realm." Ned stared at him. "Then let the realm burn. I won't send a boy to his death to save cowards from their own fire." With that, he turned and walked back inside. As the southern riders galloped away, crows circled above the walls. Winter was coming, but more than snow was in the wind. War was coming fast and bloody. In the shadows of the north, houses loyal to the Starks began sharpening their blades. The Mormonts, the Karstarks, the Umbers. One by one, they pledged to stand by Ned Stark, not just for honor, but because they saw something bigger in this boy, with a bastard's name and a dragon's blood. And far to the south, in King's Landing, Cersei whispered to Jaime in the dark, "If the boy lives, if word spreads, our children's claim will crumble. Robert's too blind to see it, but I see it." Jaime raised an eyebrow. "So what do you want me to do?" Cersei leaned in close, lips almost brushing his ear. "I want you to kill Jon Snow." And so, as snow fell heavier and drums of war began to beat, the Game of Thrones turned deadlier than ever before. A bastard was now a prince, and every man alive was ready to kill or die for him. The wind howled over the frozen wastes as Jon Snow rode toward the wall, the towering black shadow in the distance growing larger with each mile. He rode with only 2 Stark guards, trusted men Ned had chosen himself, silent, watchful, loyal to the bone. Their mission was simple: get Jon to Castle Black alive. But they all knew something had changed. The boy who had left Winterfell just days ago was no longer just a bastard heading to a life of cold duty. He was now a secret that could destroy the realm or remake it. Jon had barely spoken since leaving, his thoughts twisted in every direction. Rhaegar Targaryen was my father? Lyanna Stark my mother? Then who am I? What am I? The wall came into full view, black and endless. Castle Black's gates groaned open slowly as the riders approached. Old men in black furs looked up from their posts, squinting against the snow. Jon dismounted, numb from more than just the cold. He had always believed he didn't belong. Now he had proof. The Night's Watch was supposed to be his place of purpose, but now even that felt like another lie. Inside the stronghold, Lord Commander Jeor Mormont received them personally. "Ned Stark sent word," Mormont said, his voice rough as gravel. "He asked us to protect you. I will honor that for now. But you've brought more than just your sword to the wall, boy. You've brought a storm." Jon nodded slowly. "Then let it come." But the storm had already begun. 3 days after Jon's arrival, a small group of men arrived at Castle Black. They wore black cloaks and claimed to be messengers from the king. They brought no banners, no formal letters. Just names and orders, whispers passed in dark corners. That night, one of Jon's guards was found dead in the woods, throat slit, no witnesses, no sound, just blood in the snow and a warning carved into a tree: "Targaryens die." The next day, Mormont summoned Jon to his chambers. "You have enemies here already, lad, and they wear the faces of friends." Jon stared at him. "They came to kill me, didn't they? They'll try again, and again. This place is full of bastards, murderers, and exiled lords. Not all of them care about your name, but some of them do. Some of them are here for you. Then I should leave." "No," Mormont said firmly. "That's exactly what they want. If you leave, you'll die before the sun rises. But here you have a chance. I'll hide the truth. You'll be known as Jon Snow, nothing more. You'll train, eat, fight, sleep, just like every other man on the wall. But keep your eyes open. Trust no one." Jon nodded. He wasn't afraid of hard life. He wasn't even afraid of dying. But he was afraid of what his blood might do to the people around him. Later that night, he sat alone in the cold barracks, Ghost curled at his feet. The direwolf had been restless, pacing and growling softly at the shadows. Jon kept a knife under his pillow now. He didn't sleep much. He thought about his father, no, his uncle, Ned Stark, who had lied to everyone to protect him. And now, that lie was about to tear the realm apart. Back in Winterfell, Ned stood before a roaring fire, holding the hilt of his greatsword, ice. His bannermen were arriving one by one. Great Chun Umber, Lord Karstark, Maegor Mormont, they all asked the same thing. "Is it true? The boy is a Targaryen." And Ned, always honest, said the only truth that mattered now. "He's my sister's son, and Robert wants him dead." The bannermen looked at each other, silent. Then Greatjon spoke. "Then we ride for him. If the king wants war, we'll give him war." The north was rising. In King's Landing, Cersei received word that Jon had reached the wall. Her lips curled into a cold smile. "Then we send someone the wall has never seen before," she whispered. She turned to her maester. "Send a raven to Braavos. We need a faceless man. Far beyond the wall. The wind screamed across the icy wastes. White shadows moved in the dark. But the real threat to Jon Snow wasn't the dead walking in the night. It was the living, and they were coming for his head. The cold at Castle Black was nothing compared to the chill creeping through Jon Snow's bones. It wasn't the weather, it was the feeling that someone was always watching. Every step he took in the yard, every meal he ate in the hall, every breath he took in the dark felt heavier now. Paranoia was sinking its teeth into him. A week had passed since the first murder. The other Stark guard, Sir Jory, still stood by Jon's side like a ghost's shadow, but even he knew something was wrong. The wall wasn't just cold anymore, it was dangerous. And not because of the wildlings. There was something else here now. One night, while most of the men slept, Jon was woken by Ghost, growling low at the door. He sat up, hand on the dagger beneath his pillow. The direwolf stood tense, eyes glowing red in the moonlight. Jon moved quietly, stepping barefoot onto the icy floorboards. Outside, nothing stirred, just wind and the long, hollow silence of the wall. But Ghost didn't calm. That's when he saw it, a flicker of shadow on the far side of the yard, too quiet, too smooth. Not one of the Night's Watch. Jon narrowed his eyes, heart thudding in his chest. He woke Sir Jory without a sound. Someone's here. Within moments, the two of them were outside, swords drawn. Ghost ran ahead, silent as the snow. Then came the scream. It wasn't loud, more like a gasp cut short. By the time Jon and Jory reached the source, one of the Watch brothers, a boy named Halder, lay bleeding in the snow, throat opened clean, no sound, no struggle, just dead. And carved into the snow beside him the same warning: Targaryens die. This wasn't just a message, it was a hunt, and Jon was the prize. Far away, in the warm halls of the Red Keep, Varys whispered in Robert's ear, "The faceless men have accepted the gold. A blade has already been sent." Robert said nothing. He only stared at the fire, jaw clenched. "He's just a boy," Robert muttered finally, voice low, bitter. "Lyanna's boy." "You gave the order, Your Grace," Varys said carefully. "What would the realm think if the king changed his mind now?" Robert didn't answer. Maybe there was guilt there. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter. The wheel had started turning, and it would crush whatever lay in its path. Back at the wall, Jon stood before Mormont, face pale, eyes hard. "I need to know, Lord Commander," Jon said. "Do you still mean to protect me?" Mormont studied him for a long moment. "I gave my word to your uncle, and I don't break my word, even for kings. But if these killings continue, the Watch will turn against you. Then I need to find who's behind them. That would be wise, if you live long enough to try." That night, Jon didn't sleep. Neither did Ghost. He stayed outside, in the yard, wearing a black cloak and a sword at his side. He wasn't bait, he was the wolf, now waiting for the hunter. Hours passed. Snow fell. Then, footsteps. Light, careful, the kind that tried too hard not to make a sound. Jon stepped into the open. "Are you here for me?" he asked the dark. A figure emerged, small, hooded, no face to see. No words. The assassin moved fast, dagger flashing, but Ghost moved faster, leaping with a savage snarl. Jon ducked, rolled, and drew his sword just as the figure threw a second blade. It grazed his shoulder. Blood bloomed hot on cold skin. He charged. Steel met steel in the yard of Castle Black. The assassin was fast, silent, trained in death. Jon was younger, stronger, but less skilled. He fought with rage, with fear, with purpose. In the end, it was Ghost who saved him. The dire wolf lunged, teeth sinking deep into the killer's arm. The dagger fell. Jon grabbed it and drove it into the attacker's chest. The hood fell back. It wasn't a man. It was a girl. Young, almost his age. Her eyes stared up at him, glassy and lifeless. Jon backed away, heart pounding. He had just killed someone sent by kings and gold. He had just taken a life to save his own. And now everything was going to change. At dawn, Lord Commander Mormont stood before the gathered men of the Night's Watch. There was an attempt to murder one of our own. That cannot be ignored. From this day, Jon Snow is under my protection. Anyone who lifts a blade against him will answer to me. The brothers murmured, confused. Some looked angry, others afraid. And Jon stood at the back, blood still fresh on his tunic, knowing deep in his bones that this was only the beginning. They would not stop. Not until he was dead. Or until the realm burned. The banners of House Stark flew high as they rode south. Grey direwolves on white fields, flapping in the cold wind, leading a march not of glory, but of warning. Ned Stark had not wanted this war. But the moment Robert demanded Jon's head, the moment Cersei moved her pawns, the choice was taken from him. Winterfell was left in the care of Maester Luwin and young Bran. Robb Stark rode beside his father now, commanding 1,000 men, Karstarks, Umbers, Mormonts, all loyal to House Stark. Word had spread through the north like wildfire. The king had turned on the warden, and war was at their gates. But it wasn't just about honor anymore. It was about survival. Ned had sent ravens to Riverrun, hoping his old friend Hoster Tully would rally the Riverlords. He sent another to the Eyrie, to his sister Lysa, though he knew her fear might keep her locked in the Vale. Still, the message was simple. They want Jon. I will not give him. Each step south was colder than the last, not because of snow, but because of what waited at the end of the road, King's Landing. And Ned had tried to love him once. Now he was preparing to fight him. In King's Landing, Robert Baratheon slammed his goblet into the wall hard enough to shatter it. Wine sprayed across the stone. "They march against me," he roared. "That cold-faced bastard dares bring war to my gates." Cersei sat calm, like a lioness watching prey tire itself out. She was always patient, always one step ahead. "He has more than just swords," she said coolly. "He has a story, a prince born of Rhaegar and Lyanna. If the people believe that boy has a claim—" Robert turned to her red-faced. "I don't care about claims. I want the boy dead, and if Ned Stark stands in the way, he'll die with him." "Then let the lions feast," Jaime said, stepping forward. "Give me command. I'll crush them before they reach the trident." Robert nodded. "Take the Lannister host, burn their banners, break their spirit." But Cersei's mind was elsewhere. She had already sent word to her father, Tywin Lannister, and Tywin never rode for honor. He rode for opportunity. 2 weeks later, blood touched the earth. Near the Crossroads Inn, a Stark scouting party rode ahead of the main host. Among them were Theon Greyjoy and a few Karstark men. They never made it back. A group of gold cloaks, posing as merchants, ambushed them with steel, killing 5 before the rest escaped. One man survived long enough to be brought back to Ned. His body was soaked in blood, his voice barely a whisper. "Lion, sigil, gold cloaks. They knew we were coming." Ned closed his eyes. This wasn't war anymore. This was assassination. Theon's horse returned riderless. Robb punched the nearest tree hard enough to split skin. "They're hunting us like animals." "They're provoking us," Ned said. "They want the first strike to come from us. They want the realm to say, 'The North started this.' So what do? We keep marching." "But father," Ned's voice hardened, "we keep marching." That night, the Northmen lit no fires. Their swords stayed sharp, their sleep light. Ravens flew in all directions, messages, warnings, cries for support. And in the silence of his tent, Ned wrote one more letter. It was short, meant only for one man. John, if I fall, you must know. You are more than the blood in your veins. You are more than fire or ice. You are a Stark where it matters most, in your heart. He sealed it with wax and handed it to a raven handler. Send this to Castle Black. Make sure he gets it. Meanwhile, on the wall, John trained harder than ever. The attempt on his life had changed him. He was no longer just trying to survive. He was preparing for something bigger. More assassins would come, maybe even armies. But now he had purpose, a reason to live beyond himself. Samwell Tarly watched him from the sidelines. You fight like you've got something to prove. I do, John said quietly. I'm not just fighting for me. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought echoed in his mind like a whisper. I'm fighting for the North, for the truth, for every man who ever wore a bastard's name like a scar. And far to the west, Tywin Lannister received a raven. He read it, then burned it in his fireplace. My children play games with swords and secrets, he muttered. But war is a lion's game. He turned to his generals. Gather the men. The North rides south, then the West will ride east. And so it began. 3 great houses, 1 secret, and the boy in the snow at the heart of it all. Snow fell thick on Castle Black, turning the black stone walls white and silent. John stood at the top of the wall, his breath fogging in the icy air, watching the endless white stretch beyond the north. Ghost sat beside him, red eyes scanning the horizon like a second pair of senses. The quiet should have brought peace. But John knew better now. Peace was just the moment before the next betrayal. A raven came that afternoon. It wore the Stark seal. The maester brought it to him with hesitation. It's from your father, he said softly, unsure what name to use now. John took the letter with shaking hands. His fingers were stiff from cold and training, but it wasn't the weather that made them tremble, it was fear. He opened the seal. Read the words. His heart sank. If I fall, you must know, you are more than the blood in your veins. You are more than fire or ice. You are a Stark where it matters most, in your heart. John read it again. And again. His throat tightened. Ned Stark had never been a man of many words, but this letter held more than warning, it held love. The kind John had waited his whole life to hear. He wasn't just some hidden shame or a Targaryen secret tucked away in the snow. He was still Ned Stark's son, maybe not in blood, but in everything that mattered. John folded the letter and stared at the flame, debating whether to burn it or keep it forever. He didn't know yet. All he knew was this: if Ned fell, the North would rise, and the Wall might not stay out of it much longer. In the Riverlands, war had arrived. The Stark host clashed with the first Lannister army near the ruins of an old holdfast. Robb commanded the vanguard with surprising skill, earning the respect of battle-hardened men. His direwolf, Grey Wind, tore through enemy lines with blood on its fangs and fury in its growls. Ned fought at the center, ice swinging in wide arcs, cutting through steel and men alike. But for every Lannister soldier they cut down, 2 more seemed to rise from the woods, like the gold of their banners birthed them from the dirt. By nightfall, the ground was soaked in red, and that's when they realized it. It wasn't a battle. It was a trap. The real Lannister army, 10,000 strong, had circled behind the hills. Tywin had used his sons as bait. Jaime led the front, while the rest of the host swallowed the Northmen from the flanks. Ned and Robb were boxed in. "Pull back," Ned ordered. "Regroup at the riverbank. We're not winning this with blood, we win it by living." But retreating wasn't simple. Not in mud. and not with wounded. In the chaos, Rob was unhorsed. He fought on foot, grey wind at his side, as enemies closed in. Then came Jaime. Golden armor gleaming, twin blades in hand, he charged through the mess of bodies like a storm. Rob turned. The two met in the mud, steel flashing under a blood-red sunset. They clashed, again and again, one young and burning, the other cold and deadly. Rob held his own longer than anyone expected. But Jaime was a killer born, and he knew exactly how to break a boy who still had hope. Just as Jaime raised his blade for the final blow, grey wind lunged, fangs closing on Jaime's shoulder, dragging him back with a savage snarl. Rob gasped for air, bleeding from a cut across his ribs, but alive. He scrambled to his feet and yelled, "Fall back! Get to father!" The Stark men fought like wolves, biting, tearing, retreating only when dragged away by their wounded brothers. That night, they lost hundreds, and Rob would carry the scar of that blade across his chest forever. Ned watched the survivors limp back into camp. He didn't need to ask what had happened. He saw it in Rob's eyes, red, tired, no longer young. "We underestimated Tywin," Rob muttered. "No," Ned said. "We underestimated how far he'd go to destroy a name." They had survived, but barely. And now they were deeper in enemy territory, with fewer men and winter closing fast. But worse than that was what arrived next. Another raven. This one bore the seal of the Night's Watch. It was addressed to Ned, but it wasn't from Jon. The ink was crude, the message simple. "A brother in black has sold your boy's name. Gold buys even the coldest vows. The wall is no longer safe." Ned's hands went cold. They had bought someone inside the watch. The next knife wouldn't come from a faceless assassin in the snow. It would come from a sworn brother in black. Night at the wall had its own kind of silence, heavy, watching, almost alive. Jon Snow had grown used to it, but tonight it felt different, wrong. The cold bit deeper, the shadows stretched longer, and Ghost wouldn't leave his side for even a heartbeat. Something was coming, something dangerous. Ever since Ned's second raven arrived, Jon hadn't rested. "A brother has sold your name. The wall is no longer safe." The words stayed in his head like a nail driven deep. Jon didn't want to believe it. A brother of the Night's Watch? A sworn man? A traitor for gold? But then again, if kings could lie, if friends could become enemies, why not a brother in black? There was a quiet tension in the air during supper. Men ate without talking, spoons clinked, boots scraped. But no one made eye contact with Jon. Some avoided him, some whispered, some looked afraid. One man watched him too closely. Sir Alliser Thorne. Not because he cared about Jon, but because he sensed blood in the water, and Alliser had always enjoyed the taste of a fight he could win. "You're jumpy, Snow," Thorne sneered across the hall. "You look like a bastard expecting a knife." Jon gripped his spoon harder. "A man who expects a knife is still alive, sir." Thorne smirked. "Not for long." Ghost growled then, low and warning. Thorne walked away. Samwell Tarly leaned close, whispering, "Jon, maybe you should stay with the Lord Commander tonight, or sleep in his chamber." Jon shook his head. "No. If they come, they'll come in the dark, and I need to see who it is." He didn't say the rest aloud, but he thought it. "So I know who to kill." That night, Jon sat awake on his cot. Ghost lay beside him, head resting on Jon's knee, ears pinned back. The torches in the barracks flickered. One by one, men fell asleep. Jon didn't. Every sound made him tense. A drip of water, a cough, a boot scraping. Then, footsteps. Soft, careful, intentional. Ghost's head lifted, his body stiffened. John rose silently, gripping Longclaw. The steps came closer, slow, steady. Then the latch of the door clicked. John spun. The assassin slipped inside, face hidden under a black hood. John lunged. Steel met steel. Sparks danced. The man was trained fast, precise, silent. Whoever bought him, bought quality. Their blades clashed with sharp, metallic screams in the dark, while the rest of the barracks slept heavy, unaware death was inches away. Ghost leapt, teeth flashing, but the assassin twisted, kicking the direwolf aside with brutal force. Ghost crashed into a bedpost, yelping. Rage filled John like fire. He attacked harder. The assassin dodged and slashed, cutting John across the arm. Blood splashed onto the floorboards. John gritted his teeth, fought through the pain, swung again. The hood slipped for half a second, and John froze. It wasn't a stranger. It was Bowen Marsh, first steward of the watch. A man John had eaten meals with, a man who had taught him the rules of the watch, a man sworn to protect him. "Why?" John growled, pushing forward. Marsh didn't speak. His eyes were cold, empty, bought. John hesitated, just for a heartbeat. That was all the assassin needed. Marsh drove his dagger toward John's heart. Ghost slammed into Marsh at the last possible second, knocking the blade sideways. It sliced John's ribs, but missed the heart. John roared, grabbed Marsh by the collar, and drove Longclaw straight into the man's stomach. Marsh gasped. Blood filled his mouth. The realm needed him dead, Marsh choked. Gold buys loyalty. Boy. John twisted the blade. Marsh collapsed. Dead. Ghost limped back to John, bleeding but alive. John sank to his knees, shaken, breath ragged. He had killed a brother. He had killed someone sworn to the same vows he'd taken. He stared at his blood-soaked hands and felt something break inside him. This wasn't just a Game of Thrones anymore. This was a war where honor meant nothing, where oaths were dirt, where kings hunted children, where even the wall, the one place free of politics, had been poisoned, and Jon Snow was at the center of it all. At dawn, Lord Commander Mormont stood over Bowen Marsh's body. "Someone paid him," Jon said, voice hollow. "Someone from the crown." Mormont sighed. "Robert, Cersei, Tywin, it doesn't matter. What matters is this. You can't stay here anymore." Jon looked up sharply. "Where will I go?" "South. They'll kill me on sight." Mormont's expression hardened. "You will go north." Jon's heart dropped. "Beyond the wall? With wildlings? With the dead?" "Beyond the wall," Mormont repeated. "It's the only place where no king's reach can find you. Take Ghost, take supplies. Do not let anyone follow you." Jon swallowed hard. North of the wall meant danger, death, monsters. But south meant assassins and kings. He nodded. "When do I leave?" "Tonight." Jon closed his hand over Ned's letter in his pocket. Ned Stark was marching south into a lion's trap. Jon Snow was marching north into a land of death. Father and son, separated by war, united by danger. And the realm was on fire. The Raven never reached Winterfell. Ned Stark's final letter to Jon was intercepted by gold-cloaked riders near Moat Cailin, burned before it ever touched the hands of the boy it was meant for. Just another truth buried in blood and silence. And as Jon rode into the frost-bitten wilds beyond the wall, he had no idea his father was about to face the greatest betrayal of all. The Stark camp near the Trident was cold and tense. Robb nursed wounds that hadn't yet healed, while men whispered of Tywin's growing army closing in from the west. Inside the command tent, Ned bent over a table covered in maps and letters, strategies, escape routes, desperate pleas to old allies. But none of it would matter. Not now. A lone rider approached under a white flag. He was allowed in. It was Sir Barristan Selmy, face worn with regret. He dismounted, bowed low. "My lord, the king has commanded your presence." Alone, in King's Landing. Rob stepped forward in protest. "It's a trap. He won't survive it." Ned raised a hand to silence him. His eyes were steady. "If I don't go, he'll brand the North rebels, burn our name from history. I must try, one last time, to save the realm from tearing itself apart." "But father—" "I will not die a coward," Ned said simply. At King's Landing, Robert Baratheon looked older than ever. He drank more, slept less. The weight of his crown had broken his back long before swords were drawn. But when Ned arrived, bruised and travel-worn, Robert rose to meet him, just two old friends again. "You should have told me," Robert said bitterly, not shouting, just tired. "You would have killed him," Ned replied. "And I would never let Lyanna's son die for your rage." Robert looked at the Iron Throne. "I killed Rhaegar. I burned his children, and still the war follows me." Ned's voice was cold. "Because you never ended it. You just replaced one madness with another." The room went silent. Robert turned his back to the throne. "What do you want, Ned?" "Let the boy live. Let him stay beyond the wall. He wants no crown. He's not your enemy." Robert exhaled. "And the North?" "Leave it be, or it will burn." Robert stared at the throne for a long time. Then he spoke. "Fine. The boy lives. The North holds. I'm tired of ghosts." Ned nodded. "Then you've made the right choice. At last." But the choice wasn't his to make anymore. Because Robert died that night, poisoned in his sleep, by a cup of wine and a queen's whisper. Cersei didn't mourn. She simply acted. Joffrey was crowned king within the hour, and Ned Stark, the traitor who had marched against the throne, was arrested before the sun rose. Robb never got the raven. He only heard the whispers. "Your father is in the dungeons of King's Landing. Your banners are broken. The South wants your head." Robb clenched his jaw and said just one word: war. Far beyond the wall, Jon Snow crossed into the lands of snow and shadow. He walked where maps ended. He slept in caves and trees, ghost hunted by night, and the wind screamed like it carried the voices of the dead. On the 13th day, he saw something in the distance. Fire. He approached carefully, blade ready, but what he found wasn't wildlings. It was a woman in red, a fire burning at her feet, eyes like glowing coals. She looked at him as if she had waited her whole life. "You are the blood of the dragon," she whispered, "but you carry the wolf's soul." "Who are you?" Jon asked, hand tight on his sword. "Only a servant," she said, "of something greater than kings and wars." She stepped forward. "Winter is coming, Jon Snow. The real winter. You are not here to hide. You are here to lead." Jon frowned. "I'm not a king. I'm not even—" She silenced him with a smile. "The dead will not care what name you wear." She placed her hand on his chest. It burned like truth. "You will rise, not as a Stark, not as a Targaryen, but as the one who saw beyond the wall and did not run." Then she was gone into the snow, like a dream. Years later, songs would be sung. Of the war that broke the crown. Of Robb Stark, the boy who became a wolf and carved fire into the South. Of Ned Stark, who died a traitor and was remembered a hero. Of Cersei Lannister, whose lies built a throne of bones. But the truest story, the quietest one, was this: the bastard boy who lived, who walked into death and came back, not to wear a crown, but to save a world that had forgotten what honor was. Jon Snow never ruled, but in the end, when fire met ice and the dead rose in shadows beyond the wall, it was his name they whispered in fear, and his blade they followed into the dark. The North remembered, and so did history.